Hey, I'm Jamie from Stonemaier Games, and today I'm here for something different, something I haven't done in the past, but I kind of wish I did. Because this channel is all about game mechanisms and hopefully being a useful tool for designers as they try to expand their toolbox, as I try to expand my toolbox as a designer too, and also for people who are deciding if a game is the right choice for them. It's not really a review channel, but you can look at the mechanisms from that perspective. And so what I'm doing for the first time today is I'm going to look back at all the games that I featured on this channel in 2024, and I'm going to share my favorite mechanisms uh, from those games. So there's around 150 games that I've highlighted over the last year. I think that's around right. Yeah, around 150 games. And I looked at 150 mechanisms, and I recently looked back at each of those games to see which of the mechanisms really stuck with me as being sometimes innovative, not necessarily innovative, but just really clever and useful, and something that I want to add to my toolbox as a designer, something that I've continued to think about. And I found 32 games among them, 32 games or 32 mechanisms specifically that I've continued to think about in some way that I think are really compelling and worth discussing. So today I'm going to talk about all 32 of those, but I'll briefly talk about 22 of them, and then I'll do a top 10 where I'll more closely highlight some of those mechanisms. Although I do want to highlight two games in particular from Stonemaier Games. We had two new games this year. One of them was Wyrmspan, and the mechanism that has really stuck with me that I really, really enjoy in Wyrmspan, among many mechanisms, but this card design of hatchlings in the game. These are baby dragons, and I think they do a great job of showing the idea of a little baby dragon or a little baby creature growing up to be something bigger. For the hatchlings, whenever you activate them, you do something. Like this one says, tuck a card from your hand here, cash a milk, tuck a card. Some of them have, like the cricket catchers, have you cash a little meat token. And cash in the games means that you put a token from your supply on top of the dragon, so it's worth a point at the end of the game. Every token on the dragon is worth a point at the end of the game. It also has an ongoing ability. Anytime you cash a milk here, gain a gold to your supply. So every time you're doing that, not only are you gaining a point at the end of the game on the dragon, but you're also gaining a gold in your supply or some benefit into your supply for you to benefit from, for you to spend after that. And then this is the grow up, the dragon is grown up mechanism when the third milk is cashed. So a one-time ability at the point in the game where the dragon has consumed 3 milks, or you've tucked 3 cards, or whatever it is that you're giving them. Also gain 2 in this dragon. They have a big benefit, like gain a coin over here. That's an action in the game. Gain 2 gems, gain 2 dragon guild, or advance on the dragon guild twice. It's a big benefit in the game. So I really like this mechanism. It's kind of all the things that I want from a card all in one place, and it's designed around the theme of a little baby dragon growing up to be a full-fledged dragon. That is my favorite mechanism in Wyrmspan. Our other new release this year, we actually did. I have a game in between, Rolling Realms Redux, that was had 12 new realms, but wasn't a new game design. So I'm not highlighting that here. But Rolling Realms Redux is another game that we released in 2024. The other game released by Stonemaier Games, my company, in 2024 is Stamp Swap. Stamp Swap is a mostly simultaneous, I cut, you choose tile placement game. Again, has a lot of mechanisms that I really enjoy, but I think my favorite is the inclusion of these rare stamps, these gold foil stamps. So I think it's a neat product design decision that you have these stamps that we are saying are rare in the game, and they actually feel rare in the game because they have this gold foil. But I also like the design of them and how they integrate into the game, because they're worth a lot of points. Like this one's worth 12 points compared to this normal tile, which is worth 3 points. The normal tiles are worth either negative points or 1, 2, or 3 points. So the rare stamps are worth a lot more points. Rare stamps or stamps in Stamp Swap can come into the supply, into the pool of stamps that you can draft from. They can come into the supply face down or face up. And so you might have a rare stamp that's face down, and you get to keep that secret. Only you know that rare stamp is actually, or that face down stamp is a rare stamp. That's a really neat moment in the game. But the other thing that I think is really clever is the first time you play Stamp Swap, you might be immediately drawn to the rare stamps. In fact, I've played Stamp Swap many times. I'm still drawn to the rare stamps, but they actually aren't. This shows like new levels of strategy. They actually aren't always the best stamp to take, because they don't play into many of the goals that you're trying to accomplish in the game. Rare stamps have a shape. They do have a shape, but they don't have a color. They're goals that look at the shape of the stamp, but they don't have a color, and they also don't have a theme. the two main things that you're trying to score in the game related to color and theme. And so rare stamps, while they do give you that big burst of points, they don't give you they don't assist with many of the goals in the game, and they also don't assist with some of the ongoing scoring that you can gain from having a certain color or a certain theme. So it adds this interesting level of strategy that you don't realize right away when you're playing Stamp Swap. So yeah, these gold foil rare stamps are my favorite mechanism in Stamp Swap. Those are the two Stonemaier games that I'm going to highlight today. And now I'm going to jump into a list of the kind of the honorable mentions. These are mechanisms that I really loved in games this year. But just for the sake of brevity, I'm not going to highlight each one all that long. So I'll just go down the list. So in the game Kelp, Kelp is an asymmetric two-player game, and my favorite mechanism is that it uses knowledge and secrets as a resource. So when the octopus takes a turn, what the octopus needs to spend in the game isn't like a resource that they're collecting. Rather, it's information. They have to show the shark player, the other player, information about what tokens they have on the board. It's kind of a stratego element where the octopus has these tokens that only they can see, but the shark can't see. You have to reveal those. You have to spend that reveal and show the shark player what those tokens are. That is your resource to spend to play cards as the octopus. So that's Kelp. The game, the Vale of Eternity, uses specific currencies as resources. So it has coins in the game of 3 different types. And those coins, the game kind of leans into this idea that these 3 coins are unique resources, where there are many cards that combo off of these coins. So for example, there might be there is a 3-value coin, I think it's green, and on many cards in the game, they might say, okay, from now on, every green coin that you have is actually worth $4 instead of $3. It might say every time you spend a green coin, get a point, or every time you gain a green coin, there's a draft of the game where you're drafting coins, gain extra points or gain some extra benefit there too. So I really like this use of specific currencies in the Vale of Eternity. In the game Inside Job, this is a trick-taking game with a traitor mechanism. I really like that the traitor in the game can play off suit. I think it's a clever trick, and no one else knows that the traitor hasn't been short suited. They can just play a card off suit if they want to. Also, every player in the game is trying to win tricks. The traitor wins the hand if they win a certain number of tricks, but that also means that other players need to try to win tricks so the traitor doesn't win that many tricks. And so it makes every player look like the traitor. More hidden traitor games where every player kind of looks like the traitor based on behavior or things that the game is asking them to do that they actually need to do to win the game. That's Inside Job. Balatro. In Balatro, this is a digital poker deck building game. I love the core concept of the game where you are not trying to beat the hand of the dealer as you do normally when you play poker. Instead, you are trying to acquire damage points to deal damage to the dealer. Normally, I don't love damage in the games, but it makes perfect sense here. I also like that there are opportunities in the game to craft your hand, your specific hand you're crafting every time you have a new hand, where you can even discard some cards and redraw in the middle of a hand to craft a better hand. I really like that in Balatro. In Dune Imperium Uprising, I love the addition of the spies. The spies in Dune Imperium Uprising are they're not exactly a worker, but they feel a little bit like a worker, where you can put them between one or more action spaces, or I think it's 2 or more action spaces. And in doing so, it gives you access to those action spaces, even if another player has blocked them. So it's a nice kind of backup way to get into an action, nice thematic way too, in a worker placement game that could otherwise be pretty tight. That's Dune Imperium Uprising. In Skyrise, I love the spatial auction in the game. This is the core mechanism in the game, but I love the idea of a spatial auction where you are bidding on locations on the board, but you can only bid on locations next to where the previous bid was placed. So it's both an auction, but also the spatial element of that can end up wherever you place on a location can limit what the next player can choose from. That's Skyrise. Star Realms Legacy, a game that we're playing right now. I love in Star Realms Legacy that it's a campaign game with upgrades, but the upgrades happen all the time, where whenever you gain a card, if you pay $2 or $3 extra, depending on the type of card, you can upgrade that card with a sticker that helps, that makes the card just better from then on for everybody, but also helps you specifically because it converts that card to your faction as well. It still retains its original faction, but it's also a new faction as well. And I just love that it happens immediately. These upgrades happen immediately. The cards enter your deck and are in your deck for the rest of the game, and then they're in the core deck for the rest of the campaign. I like how fast these upgrades happen. Star Realms Legacy, another Star game, Star Wars Unlimited. I love the use of cards as resources, and yet the colors on those cards still matter. In Star Wars Unlimited, you have the opportunity to play a card face down at the beginning of your turn, and that card becomes a resource, kind of like a mana in Magic the Gathering. But that card is face down, so it doesn't have a color. So instead, the game looks at the different aspects on your character and your core location, 2 cards that you start out the game with. And if you play a card of those resources, of those aspects, then you don't have to worry about those aspects. But if you have a card that you want to play that doesn't have those aspects, which you're allowed to do, you're allowed to have those cards in your deck, you have to pay 2 extra resources. So I really like the flexibility that this gives players to include high-powered cards in their deck that don't necessarily share the aspects that you have with your character and your location, but it also gives players a really flexible mana system or resource system to spend on the cards that do match those aspects in their deck. That's Star Wars Unlimited. Slay the Spire, my favorite mechanism in the game. It's just a small, simple mechanism. And that is that every turn or every round, I think it's every turn, all players share the same turn, you roll a single D6 die. And that die impacts a ton of different things in the game. And it impacts all of the enemies. It impacts many cards that you've accumulated. I just love the simplicity of having a single number to think about on a die for so many different cards every turn of the game. Opposed to rolling a different die for every game, for every card. I'm sorry. I think that's a really, really special use of a die in Slay the Spire. In the game Arcs. In Arcs, I really admire the idea that combat is attacker driven. So only the attacker in Arcs is rolling dice, and it kind of has agency over the combat. The defender might have some special abilities on cards that impact combat, but in general, it is only the attacker. They're going to roll some dice and combat resolves. So it makes combat much faster than many games. The defender doesn't even have, like I said, the defender typically does not have many choices in combat. They're kind of just waiting for the outcome to happen, but there are good things on those dice for the defender that the attacker has rolled. Really unique twist on combat to just have the attacker engage in combat, even though there is a defending player. That's in Arcs. In the Magic the Gathering set Bloomburrow, there's the mechanism of offspring. So in Bloomburrow, there are these cards that you can play that say, okay, if you pay, and they're usually cute animal creatures. They say if you pay usually 1 or 2 extra mana, sometimes more, you can create an offspring token. And these tokens are exact copies of the card that you just played. So if I'm playing an Aardvark, I can pay 2 extra to create a little baby Aardvark that acts almost identical to that Aardvark, the main Aardvark card. I really like this idea. I mean, you're creating a duplicate card, which is really powerful in Magic. And the theme of creating an offspring that is a copy of the creature that you just played is really clever. That's Bloomburrow, Magic the Gathering set. And Captain Flip. Captain Flip is a game where the core mechanism is that you, on your turn, you are drawing a tile, and you're choosing you're only looking at one side of that tile, and you're choosing to either place that tile into your tableau or flip it and place that into your tableau. And if you flip it, you can't flip it back. So you don't know what's on the back side of that tile. You're kind of gambling that it's something that you want more than what's on the front side of the tile. Really clever mechanism, really fun for a light game like Captain Flip. In Black Forest, my favorite tile in the game in Black Forest, a game that has a bunch of different intersecting action, worker placement action selection spots, is this wagon tile. The wagon tile is a tile that you can choose if you are either next to it or really anywhere on the board. You can pull the wagon to you or send the wagon away from you if you're next to it. And when you do, you gain some resources. Everyone else gains some resources. It kind of represents a traveling merchant, so everyone else benefits too. And you get to switch that tile with another tile on the board. So you're either bringing a tile to you that you really want, or you're sending a tile away from you and getting the wagon because that's what you really want. You want the wagon's benefit. I think that's a really clever way to kind of keep a dynamic worker placement system where the actions are shifting throughout the game, and sometimes based on what you really need in that moment. That's in Black Forest. In the game Moon Rollers is a push your luck light tableau building game where you have a few cards that you're accumulating, a crew that you're accumulating, but it has these hazard tokens. The hazard tokens in Moon Rollers are my favorite mechanism. in the game where you have opportunities in the game to gain these hazard tokens. You've accomplished a goal, but it comes with some hazards, and you draw some tokens, some of these hazard tokens, and they're going to be worth points at the end of the game unless you have the most of the hazard icon in the game on those tokens. So you can go after high value tokens, but they're going to have more hazards on them. It's this mechanism in the game that I've seen in other games where they might have you be ineligible to win the game if you have the most hazard of any player. But instead, this game says you have a chance to win the game. You just, even if you have the most hazard tokens, you just don't get to score in this category of the game, these specific tokens, which I think is a really clever mechanism in Moon Rollers. In The Gang, the cooperative poker game, it features ongoing difficulty adjustments, which I really like. In this light sort of game where you're trying to you're playing through multiple rounds of the same game, trying to win 3 hands of the game, essentially. If you win a hand, the next hand gets a little bit more difficult, but just temporarily, and that card goes away. If you lose a hand, the next hand gets a little bit easier. You get a little asymmetric boost to make that hand a little bit easier. So I really like this ongoing adjustment in difficulty. And these adjustments don't last. They aren't persistent. It's just for that one turn. So you're not remembering all these new rules throughout the game. It's just a one-time rule that you're trying to remember. And sometimes it's a one-time benefit, so you don't even have to remember it based on whether or not you won or lost the previous hand. That's The Gang. In SETI, SETI is a game about a search for extraterrestrial life. I really like the idea of asymmetric pairings in the game, but not in the way that I often think about asymmetric pairings. Usually I think about it like in Scythe, where you have a faction mat and a player mat, you're pairing them together. That's my asymmetric pairing. Instead, SETI has a global asymmetric pairing where there are 2 aliens to be discovered each game. And those aliens, when paired together, form an asymmetric pairing. They interact. They don't interact with each other in different ways, but they add new interactions to the game. And because there are 2 different ones out of 5 total, it leads to a lot more replayability than if you just had 1 alien in each game. So I really like that in SETI. In the party game Caution Signs, this is in the vein of the game So Clover. I could highlight So Clover for the same mechanism, but in Caution Signs, you have these 2. Each player gets these 2 cards that form a kind of a description. They might say a friendly ghost. So it has an adjective and a noun, and you have to draw a friendly ghost. But the mechanism that I really like in the game is that, although I like the timer in the game too, I think I mentioned that in my video about it, a 20-second timer to draw something is the right amount of time. But I really like that you're then taking those cards, putting them face down on the table with all other players' cards, adding 2 cards from each category and mixing them all together. And then the guesser or guessers have to flip over all those cards and figure out which ones go with what people have drawn. So I really like this mechanism in a party game of having this private information and then shuffling all together for someone else to figure out, just like in So Clover. That's Caution Signs. In Duel for Middle-earth, Lord of the Rings Duel for Middle-earth, I love that there are 3 instant win conditions. There are no points in the game. There's no kind of default way to win. Instead, the tension is in every one of the win conditions. Similar to Seven Wonders Duel, but in Seven Wonders Duel, there is a points way to win the game. They went full thematic in Duel for Middle-earth, where every win condition comes down to kind of the last moment in being an instant win condition, which I think is really cool. That's Duel for Middle-earth. In the game Unconscious Mind, a game about therapy and Sigmund Freud, I really like the use of clear cards in the game, where whenever you gain a new patient, you put a clear card on top of them that shows it shows something that ails them, something that they're processing. It shows a nightmare often that they're processing. And to show partial progress for that patient, there's a way that you can clear that card off of the patient. And when you do, it gives you an instant benefit, and it opens up an ongoing benefit printed on that patient card. So I really like this idea of partial progress in games in general, that you don't have to accomplish a full goal, that you can make it halfway there, and that is meaningful too. And then later on, hopefully cure the patient fully. But I also love the use of the component, the clear cards, to accomplish this, or to showcase this partial progress. Last and honorable mention, I know there's a lot of these, is the game Charcuterie, which is a I Cut You Choose tile placement game where you're building a charcuterie board. And I really, really like in the game that whenever that tile placements aren't final, you have the freedom to rearrange any of the tiles that you place as you place them, or throughout the game, really, until the end of the game. You have the freedom to move around these tiles that you've gained. Once the last tile is drafted at the end of the game, there's a 1-minute timer. So you can't just wait until the end of the game to arrange everything. You're still rearranging them throughout the game to solve different puzzles in the game, score more points. But I really like that freedom to draft, to freedom to rearrange things on an ongoing basis. That is charcuterie. So let's get to the top 10. The top 10 are the mechanisms that I've thought the most about personally as a designer, mechanisms that I might be interested in implementing in some form in the future in my games, or that I just really admire about these games. So number 10 is the game Moon. So in Moon, you are in Moon, you are drafting cards. It's a drafting game. So you have a hand of cards, you're drafting one of those cards, and you're passing it on to the next player. And you're typically adding that card to your tableau, with one exception. In every hand, so whenever you pass out all the cards at the beginning of each round, you have a hand of cards. Every player also inserts an expedition card into that hand. And that expedition card stays in that hand. And it circulates around the table. It can be selected, but it cannot be kept by any player. I think this is a really brilliant twist in a drafting game, that you can have a card that is always in each hand. So you know it's going to go around the table. You know you can draft it. It gives the designer a lot of agency over the types of things they need players to see in the game, because everything else is random in a drafting game. Yeah, I think this is a really, really clever addition. I'm doing a video actually quite soon about drafting games, and so I want to make sure that I mention Moon in that video. But yeah, I think this is such a clever mechanism that there's one card that stays in each hand. It's a different card in each hand that you know you can see. It also gives you a little bit of freedom in choosing cards, because you know that card is going to continue to come around the table, because no one can actually keep that card, these expedition cards in Moon. So yeah, that is my favorite mechanism, one that I've thought about a lot over the last year, from the drafting game Moon. Number 9 is the game Invincible. So Invincible is a simultaneous cooperative game where you're trying to defeat a bunch of bad guys using some heroes. And the way that you do this is through bag building, combined with a little bit of tableau building as well. But bag building, where with a neat push your luck twist, where in real time, simultaneously, you can draw tokens from your bag and add them to your cards to activate different abilities. But among those tokens are black tokens. And if you ever have 5 total black tokens, that's considered the bust in this game. You've busted. The nice thing about the black tokens is that they're wild. So they're actually not terrible to draw. You actually want to see a few black tokens, just not too many. You can see this player here has used a black token on airlift. There's another one over here on convenient creation. So you have these black tokens. But the key, I think, my favorite mechanism about this element of Invincible is that you are always required to draw 3 tokens at a time. So unlike one of my other favorite bag building games, Quacks of Quedlinburg, where you're drawing 1 token at a time, hoping that you don't bust, you have to draw 3 at a time in Invincible. So if you have 2 black tokens out on your board, there is a chance that that your handful of 3 tokens that you must draw exactly 3, all 3 might be black, and you might bust off of that. So the chance of busting is much higher, much riskier, but also there's a chance that you might draw 3 other tokens that you really want, or that there might be 2 black tokens and 1 that's not black, and those 2 black tokens are wild. So that's great. So I really like this element of drawing 3 tokens at a time in the bag building push your luck mechanism of Invincible. At number 8, we have the game Daybreak. So Daybreak features a really, really clever action system. This is a cooperative game. My favorite mechanism of the game has almost nothing to do with the cooperative element of it. It is the action system itself, the tableau building action system itself, which is you get a bunch of cards in the game. And these cards, you choose to play them in these 5 different columns. I believe you are limited to 5 different columns. And your choice is to play the card on top or slide it underneath. If you slide it underneath, hopefully you can see this a little bit. Let's see if I can zoom in. Yeah, I can zoom in a little bit here. You have these ongoing icons that you're gaining by sliding it underneath. But the card on top, you can see that down here. The card that's on top gives you an ongoing ability. These are actions that you can activate, oftentimes if you can afford them, or they're thresholds that mean different things. But these are ongoing things that you can benefit from if they are the bottom face-up card. I actually have another game that I'm going to talk about later that uses this concept of a face-up card and the choice to insert cards. And this is the key part of it. The choice is yours. You can insert, when you decide to insert a card, you can insert it anywhere you want, and you can insert it on the top or the bottom. So you're not limited based on Like I might have a card that I played early on in the game face up as the fully visible card, and I might keep that as a fully visible card for the rest of the game. Whereas in other piles, I might switch back and forth based on an ability that is more useful earlier in the game versus later in the game. Multi-use cards used in a tableau for the stacking mechanism, really, really cool mechanism in the game Daybreak. At number 7, Dungeon Maker Deluxe, probably the most under the radar game in this in what I'm talking about today, but it has a really cool mechanism tied to the cards that you're drafting. The game is divided into 2 halves. One where you're building a dungeon, and then a second half where you are trying to proceed through and make it all the way through another player's dungeon that they've built. And so you have these cards. Let's see again if I can zoom in. No, not much of a zoom here. But you have these cards that you're drafting. And whenever you play a card in the first half of the game, you are drawing a shape. So like this card, I'm drawing this big shape in my dungeon, in one of the rooms of my dungeon, with some icons on it that the other player has to surpass. And so in the first half of the game, you're generally trying to draw these really big shapes that are really, because the other player has to cross off all the icons in those shapes to make it through each layer. However, the card that I choose for that, in the second phase of the game, I have to flip over all these cards and shuffle them together, and they give me shapes at the bottom of the card, different shapes and different penalties and benefits that I get to use when I'm trying to proceed through the dungeon. So now I'm trying to proceed through the dungeon. I'm trying to cross off squares that my opponent has put together in their layer based on this configuration. So sometimes big shapes are useful in this part of the game. Sometimes small shapes are useful because I'm trying to clear each layer completely. So yeah, I really like this dual use of cards in this drafting, dungeon building, dungeon crawling game, Dungeon Maker Deluxe. At number, what is this? I up to 6? Yeah, 6 is Harrow County. So in Harrow County, it has, I'm talking about action selection systems again. This has a really clever action system where at the beginning of each round, you're going to set up 4 tokens. You can see 3 of the red ones here, 3 of the purple ones, but there's actually 4 that are lined up, and the actions are the same. The red action is the same as my purple action over here. With also a random array of tokens in the middle. And whenever I choose an action over the course of the round, I'm going to choose 3 of my actions. I get to, if I'm the first one to choose, say this action right here, I get to gain this middle benefit as a bonus, and then I flip over that tile. So it adds this really great decision space in the game of, do I want to be the first player to use any particular action this round, knowing that I get to gain this benefit in the middle? Or is this action that I need to take that the other opponent has already taken, is that just more valuable that based on what I need to do in the game right now to survive, to try to win this game? Really, really clever one-on-one action selection system in this game in Harrow County at number 6. At number 5, one of my favorite health mechanisms I've ever seen in a game, and definitely in a deck building game, in Flame and Fang. I love the health system in this game. Basically, at the beginning of each round of Flame and Fang, and maybe it changes based on the scenario, but the one that I remember has, you gain these 4 health cards. You can see it right here. 4 health cards on the table in front of you. You have 4 health. And if you ever reduce to 0 health, you lose the round. However, whenever you lose a health, the health card doesn't just disappear. It actually goes into your deck. And it gives, this means is it gives you an opportunity to see that health again and to actually use that card either for a benefit. You can leave it in your deck and use it as a benefit for the deck building, or you can choose to play that card to heal yourself and put that card back into play. This is brilliant. I love this on every level, that you have this health that starts out in the form of cards. It's very easy to see how much health you have. But it isn't this separate system in the game. These cards are cards that can go back into your deck that you can see again, you can choose to put back into play. Yeah, just a really, really clever health system in this deck building game, Flame and Fang, at number 5. At number, I want to make sure I have these in the right order here. At number 4, I have The Witcher Old World. In The Witcher Old World, the combat system in the game and the use of tags on cards, I think, is really, really clever. So in this game, if you're participating in combat, you say I play this card on the left here. So it deals 1 damage, and it also says that I get to, I believe this is draw card, but I'll need to refresh myself on that, but deal a damage. And then it has these little tabs over here. And if I have a card in one of these colors, I can play that card after playing this card. So you're trying to string together series of tabs. So I play this purple card, but it gives me access to all these other colors. And so I play a yellow card. Actually, this looks like a yellow blue card. And then this card has a purple tag. So if I have a purple tag, then I can also play that card. So it gives me a lot of flexibility to play additional cards and string together multiple cards in the feeling of a combo to hopefully successfully defeat my opponent in this combat, which either can be another player or can be a monster in the game. Really clever tab combo system in The Witcher Old World at number 4. And number 3 is another digital game. I've mentioned a few of them, like Balatro in this series of mechanisms from 2024. But in Blueprints, digital game Blueprints, my favorite mechanism, one of my favorite mechanisms of the year, is this tile drafting system or tile selection system every time you enter a new room. So you have you're given 3 different tiles that you can choose from. You have to choose one of them, and that becomes the room that you are walking into. And then when you walk into that room, I think I have this set up here. Here's one, here's another. Whenever you walk into that room, you are then giving a first-person perspective. You're then physically walking through that room from a first-person perspective. And whenever you reach a door, you reach that door, and you're shown 3 different tiles that might be that room. So whatever you decide will be that room is the next room that you walk into. Really, really clever switch between kind of tile selection, top-down tile selection, as you see what this room looks like from above, to first-person perspective of what you're seeing as you're actually walking around and doing a little bit of exploring and puzzle solving in the room itself once you're in there. That is the game Blueprints. It hasn't had a full release yet, but it does have a really robust demo on Steam. That's number 3, Blueprints. And number 2, back to tabletop games and back to this idea of card stacking that I really seem to like this year in both Daybreak and Let's Go to Japan. The use of the mechanism of highlight of the day in Let's Go to Japan, I think, is really clever. So you were kind of in Let's Go to Japan, you are scheduling a trip to Japan, and you are deciding what you're going to do each day and the order in which you're going to do those things. And that order actually really matters in the game, because in the second half of the game, you are going through each day. You're saying, okay, on my Friday, I'm going to Nijo Castle first, which gives me this resource icon of having this kind of experience. It's not a resource that you spend. It's just a resource that you have from then on. I'm also getting 3 points. Then I'm going to go to, also in Kyoto, the Arashiyama Bamboo Grove. We went to Tokyo recently. We didn't actually go to Nijo or Arashiyama, but here you gain, you spent your money well because it was free apparently. You gain another one of these resources. I believe this is like the culture icon or maybe nature icon. Gain 2 more points. And then the highlight of the day, place that I did go to Japan when I went recently, is Kiyomizu-dera Temple. Kind of redundant, dera means temple. But you gain these 2 icons, these 2 resources, and gain 2 points. And I have this set up here. Here we go. Because this card is the fully exposed card, it's the thing that you're ending your day with, you also get the benefit at the bottom. This says visit shops on the way up, and there are a lot of shops on the little narrow street on the way up to Kiyomizu-dera. If you have these resources, if so far you've accumulated 2 shopping resources and 2 food resources, you gain 2 points for these icons that you have, for however many icons, pairs of icons of these that you have in your supply so far. So you're building up thematically to this big highlight of the day, and it's this great choice. Where do you put cards into this supply? So your Friday starts off empty. I might start with Nijo Castle, and then I have to decide when I get Arashiyama, do I put that on top for the highlight of the day, or do I slide it behind Nijo Castle? And same choice with Kiyomizu-dera. Do I put it as my highlight of the day? Do I insert it somewhere else in this day instead? Really cool mechanism. This and Daybreak, very similar, but really satisfying in the way that they're accomplished. And also, I need to remember that for my drafting video, that this is also a drafting game. You're doing an element of drafting over here in Let's Go to Japan. So finally, at number 1, my favorite mechanism of the year is found in the game The White Castle, which I've also, I believe, set up hopefully for a few different images here. Yeah, so 2 different images here that correspond. So the core action system in the White Castle is that you are choosing a die from one of 3 different bridges, and you're either choosing the lowest value die shown here or the highest value die. We can kind of see a 6 die in the background. This matters because of the die placement system in the game. Yeah, here we go. So whenever you place a die, there are numbers printed on the board. Here's some on the player mats here that you can see. But there are lower numbers on the player mat on the board. Whenever you place a die, if the number that you place is higher than the number printed on the board, you gain the difference in coins. So if I gain a really high value die, a 6 value die, and I place it on a 4 value slot, then I gain 2 coins. That's great. Great choice. Gain some coins in the game. Coins are useful in the game. The other choice, though, is to choose a lower value die. And if I choose the lowest value die, in this case, the 2, and I place it, I have to pay, and I place it on a spot with a higher number. I have to pay the difference in coins then. That's the reason that you need coins in this game. However, because I chose the lowest die available on that bridge at the time, I get to activate my lantern benefit. And this is a growing benefit that can evolve over the course of the game. Currently, you start out the game with 1 benefit for your lantern. This is my 1 benefit right now, but I can have a bunch of cards here. And so whenever I activate that lantern benefit, I can get a bunch of benefits all at once. And so it gives me a reason throughout the game to decide, do I need more coins right now for the higher valued die, or do I want to get the lowest value die and activate my lantern benefit? And sometimes even based on the dice that are rolled, the lowest value die might be a 4 or a 5. And so I might be gaining a 4 or 5, activating my lantern benefit, and still placing that die on the board and gaining coins because it is the die that I place is higher than the value printed on the board. Really brilliant combination of mechanisms for this action system in the game, The White Castle. So, longer video than I expected, but hopefully this video gives you a nice summary of some of my favorite mechanisms from 2024. Maybe it gives you some ideas for some games that you're designing. I'd love to hear what you think. What's a mechanism or two, looking back at 2024, that you have found yourself thinking about and really, really enjoying and wanting to see in other games, or twists on it in other games? Let me know about that in the comments below. Thanks.